My name is Celeste Warren, 30 years old. Last Saturday evening, I sat at the head of a long table at Magnolia's Italian Bistro, the kind of place where soft jazz trickled from hidden speakers and candles flickered against polished wine glasses. I had chosen the place thinking it might smooth tensions, but I should have known better. My parents leaned forward, identical smirks tugging at their lips, like two stage actors waiting to drop the punchline of a cruel joke. "Tomorrow," my father said with deliberate calm, "we're moving into your apartment. No excuses." My mother nodded in agreement, her voice sugar-sweet. "Family takes care of family. You've got plenty of space, Celeste. It's time you gave back." Across the table, my sister lounged lazily against her boyfriend's shoulder, twirling a strand of hair like a queen, listening to peasants barter. She didn't even need to speak. Her nod was enough. The decision was made. In their minds, my life was theirs to fold neatly into their plans. For a heartbeat, the room blurred. Forks clinked, nearby. Laughter swirled, but all I saw was their expectation. That old assumption that I would, once again, bend. Their smug faces burned into me. They thought I was still the girl who had given up her dreams to pay their debts. Instead, I smiled, set my wine glass down carefully, and let my voice cut through the air. "Fine," I said evenly, "but don't forget to bring $860,000 by morning." The table froze. My father's eyes widened, my mother's hand jerked against her napkin, and my sister's smirk collapsed into disbelief. Her boyfriend's fork hovered midair. They hadn't expected resistance, much less an ultimatum. What they didn't know was that I had already made a move they would never see coming. Stick around, because this story isn't just about a dinner table showdown. It's about years of sacrifices, betrayals, and the moment I finally stopped being their safety net. And before I take you through the rest, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I want to know just how far my story has reached. Growing up in our modest brick house in Greenville felt like living inside two separate worlds, stitched under one roof. I was the older daughter, always expected to hold things together. My sister? She got everything handed to her as though entitlement was her birthright. Every year, my parents poured thousands into her private school tuition, parading her around as their golden child, even when she skipped classes and came home with mediocre grades. They bought her a shiny red convertible that glowed in our driveway, while I trudged to the public high school on foot, my backpack stuffed with secondhand textbooks I'd bought myself. Her art classes, her European summer trips, her creative pursuits, all bankrolled by them, justified as investments in her future. Meanwhile, I was told to manage with what I had. But the worst part wasn't the favoritism, it was the theft. Small, relentless cuts to my trust. As a teenager, she borrowed my babysitting money with promises she never kept. Once, she maxed out my parents' credit card on a $200 designer jacket, wore it twice, then tossed it in her closet. When I dared to call her out, she smirked at me like a predator smelling weakness. "You're just stingy, Celeste," she sneered. And my parents? They backed her up. "Be more generous. She's your little sister. That's your role." The sting was sharp, but I swallowed it because arguing was pointless. The deepest wound came at 17. I had earned a partial scholarship to study abroad in London, a dream I'd spent years chasing. But that spring, my father's emergency surgery slammed our family with hospital bills. They never once asked her to contribute. "She's too young," they said, as though she weren't just 3 years younger than me. Instead, they turned to me. I gave up the scholarship. I stayed home. I took a job at the local grocery store, ringing up canned beans and discount cereal under fluorescent lights to help cover the debt. They thanked me once, just once, then went right back to praising her latest art piece, a canvas splashed with blue streaks she abandoned in the garage weeks later. That was the moment I learned my place in their eyes, the reliable one, the fixer, the invisible daughter, unless they needed something. And yet, those sacrifices forged a fire inside me. I stopped asking for approval I'd never receive. Instead, I turned inward, building a quiet plan for escape. In high school, I threw myself into math and science, working nights and saving every dollar. I opened a secret savings account at the local credit union, putting away bits of my diner tips and tutoring money. By senior year, I had scraped together enough to pay my first semester of college without a single handout from them. Meanwhile, she partied, skipped classes, and still received a graduation bash with a catered cake and balloon arches. My parents clapped for her as if mediocrity was genius. I stood in the corner, clapping too. though in my chest I was already gone, planning my escape brick by brick. It wasn't just about money, it was about being erased. I was the girl who fixed the leaky sink while they drove her to a gallery opening. The girl who spent weekends tutoring kids to save up while she breezed through shopping trips with their credit card. Every time I thought about confronting them, her voice played in my head, "Why can't you just be happy for me?" And my parents would nod as if my resentment was the flaw, not their favoritism. Looking back, I realized those years weren't wasted. They built me. They forced me to sharpen, to fight, to imagine a future where I would never again let them feed off my back. I wasn't going to let their favoritism define me. Not anymore. But the irony, no matter how far I ran, no matter how much I built, they never stopped looking for ways to pull me back in. And when I finally broke free, they didn't celebrate. They circled, waiting for the moment to strike. College wasn't freedom. It was survival dressed up as opportunity. At 18, I enrolled at Greenville University with a partial scholarship that barely covered tuition. To make ends meet, I split my life in two. Mornings as a full-time student, afternoons waiting tables at a diner on Main Street, and late nights filing medical records at the local hospital. Most nights I got by on 5 hours of sleep, clutching coffee like oxygen. My feet blistered from double shifts, my hands smelled of grease and printer ink, and my eyes burned from cramming formulas at 2 a.m. Meanwhile, my sister's path was smooth as silk. My parents paid her full tuition at a prestigious liberal arts college 2 hours away. She threw rooftop parties, posted glossy photos from beach trips, and never worked a day. During my 10-minute lunch breaks, I'd scroll past her carefree smile on Instagram, sunlight bouncing off her hair while my own uniform reeked of bacon grease. The contrast gnawed at me. I wasn't jealous of her parties. I was furious at the way my sacrifices vanished into thin air while hers were celebrated with applause. But fate has a way of dropping small anchors in the middle of storms. One rainy afternoon, while hunched over a chipped mug of diner coffee and a statistics textbook, I met Daniel Brooks. He slid into the booth across from me, holding his laptop like a lifeline. He was a software engineering major, quiet but sharp-eyed, the kind of guy who noticed things without needing to speak them aloud. "Mind if I sit?" he asked, nodding at the crowded cafe. Within minutes, our conversation turned into confession. He fixed computers in high school to pay bills, just as I'd babysat and tutored for every dollar. He understood the grind, the late nights, the bone-deep exhaustion. There was no pity in his gaze, only recognition. We started studying together, trading survival tips and cheap tacos from the food truck parked behind the library. He became my anchor, reminding me I wasn't crazy for wanting more. He said once, with a crooked smile, "You're not building an escape plan, Celeste. You're building a future." His words lit something inside me I didn't even realize had gone dim. It was around that time I stumbled into an online course on healthcare technology. I didn't even know why I clicked it, but something in me sparked. The idea of using tech to help people monitor their health, bridging medicine and software, clicked in my brain like puzzle pieces snapping together. Through that course, I landed an unpaid internship at a scrappy little Greenville startup. The office was a cramped shoebox with mismatched chairs and an espresso machine that hissed more than it brewed, but to me, it felt like a door cracking open. I poured myself into it, taking on late-night coding, data entry, even fetching pizza when funds ran low. And when the founder mentioned they needed seed money, I didn't hesitate. I pulled $2,000 from the savings I'd built from diner tips and hospital paychecks. To anyone else, it was nothing. To me, it was years of sacrifice condensed into a single bet. I didn't tell my parents. They would have laughed, said I was foolish for risking so much on a silly little app. I kept it secret, like a seed buried in soil. By my senior year, the gamble had begun to sprout. The app hit 10,000 users. The startup offered me a full-time role. For once, my work was paying off, not just in money, but in proof that I wasn't invisible. And yet, my parents never noticed. They were too busy bragging about my sister's creative spirit. She was failing half her classes, but they still threw her a graduation party complete with a catered cake and champagne. I couldn't afford to attend. I was working a double shift at the hospital that night. I watched photos trickle in on social media, my parents clapping, their arms around her. Her boyfriend lifting her onto his shoulders while confetti rained down. Not one message asking if I could make it. Not one word about the fact that I was working to keep my own life afloat. I told myself I didn't care. But late that night, alone in the hospital parking lot, I sat in my beat-up car and cried until the steering wheel was slick with tears. It wasn't just being overlooked. It was the creeping realization that even if I cured cancer, they'd still find a way to call her the miracle. But grief became resolve. By the time I graduated with a 3.7 GPA, my debt was lower than most, not because I was lucky, but because I had burned myself out to keep it that way. The startup pulled me in fully, and I ran with it, working until my knuckles ached from typing. Daniel was still there, steady as always. We'd walk home together in the glow of streetlights, sharing cheap dinners and wilder dreams. He reminded me that my worth wasn't tied to their validation. But deep down, I knew the truth. Sooner or later, my family would notice what I'd built. And when they did, they wouldn't come to celebrate. They'd come to claim it. And I was right. Success has a way of drawing shadows. By 27, I had worked my way from unpaid intern to lead developer at the startup. We'd grown from 3 dreamers in a shoebox office to a team with real contracts, real revenue. My sweat equity had turned into a small but valuable stake in the company. For the first time in my life, I had more than survival. I had stability. I used part of my earnings to buy a modest 1-bedroom apartment on the edge of Greenville. It wasn't flashy, but every corner hummed with the proof that I'd done it myself. I still remember the first night I slept there, box spring on the floor, blinds half broken, and yet I felt like royalty. I thought maybe, just maybe, my family would see me differently now. I invited them to visit the office when our app crossed $1 million in revenue. My parents walked in, eyes darting across the glowing monitors, the hum of engineers tapping at their keyboards. For a flicker of a moment, I thought I saw pride. My sister trailed behind them, snapping selfies against our logo wall. "This is impressive," my father said, his tone measured, like a banker assessing collateral. "You've done well," my mother added, her smile thin, but her eyes sharp. Then came the questions. Too specific, too eager. "What's the company's valuation now?" my father asked. "And how much of that is yours?" "You're making good money, right?" my mother pressed, her voice syrupy. "Family helps family." And my sister, with a scoff, chimed in, "You could share a little. I mean, it would make things easier for everyone." Their words seemed casual, but their eyes gave them away. Hungry, calculating, circling like vultures. That night, lying awake in my apartment, Daniel whispered what I already knew. "They're not proud, Celeste. They're planning." The pit in my stomach hardened into certainty. Not long after the first warning arrived. It was Aunt Carol, my father's older sister, who called late one night. Carol had always been the quiet observer at family gatherings, the one who saw through the favoritism but rarely intervened. Her voice was low, urgent. "Celeste," she said, "your parents are in trouble, deep trouble." I froze, the phone pressed tight to my ear. She explained that they had racked up over $50,000 in credit card debt, mostly to bankroll my sister's lifestyle. A rooftop loft downtown, a week-long trip to Paris, designer clothes, all paid for while their own savings dwindled. Worse, Carol had overheard them. "They're counting on you to bail them out," she warned. "They're saying you're doing well now, that it's only fair you help." Her words left me cold. Days later, I overheard proof with my own ears. I had stopped by my parents' house to pick up an old box of books, and as I passed the living room, I heard my father's voice through the crack in the door. "Celeste has that big apartment now," he said, clipped, businesslike. "We can move in, save on rent, and she can chip in more. It's only fair." I stood frozen in the hallway, blood pounding in my ears. It was as if I'd been shoved back in time, to the girl forced to give up London, to the daughter whose sacrifices were treated like obligations. They weren't just circling me. They were already planning how to carve up my life. That night, I sat in my apartment staring at the walls I had fought for, and I knew I wouldn't let them take it. So I made a move of my own. A colleague referred me to Patrick Sullivan, a lawyer with a sharp mind and a tidy little office lined with law books. Sitting across from him, I laid everything out. The startup, my shares, the sudden, unsettling interest from my family. Patrick adjusted his glasses, scanning the paperwork. "Your stake is valued at just over $1 million, he said evenly. "If you want to protect it, we need to move fast." Together, we drew up a plan. I would sell my entire stake to a venture capital fund for $860,000, clean, legal, untouchable. By the time my family came knocking, it would be locked down. When I signed the initial papers, my hand trembled, not from fear, but from the strange mix of grief and relief. It felt like putting armor around everything I had bled for. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't tell my sister. At first, I didn't even tell Daniel. But secrets weigh heavy. One night, over takeout containers littered across my kitchen counter, I broke down. "They're not proud of me," I whispered, voice cracking. "They just want what I have." Daniel reached across the table, his hand steady on mine. "You've always been stronger than they give you credit for," he said softly. "Don't let them rewrite your story." His words steadied me, but I also knew love wasn't enough to stop what was coming. So I turned to someone who understood strategy as well as survival, Sharon Ellis, a colleague turned close friend. Over steaming mugs of coffee at her apartment, I laid out the mess. Sharon, who had battled her own family's greed years before, leaned back in her chair and smirked. "They'll push harder when they realize you're not bending," she said. "You need to be ready for war." We brainstormed, mapped contingencies, talked about strengthening the startup's next project in case my family tried to sabotage me through public scandal. For the first time, I didn't feel like prey. I felt prepared. But even with allies at my side, the storm was coming. I could feel it in the silence after my sister's smirks, in my father's calculating gaze, in my mother's too sweet words. They didn't see me as a daughter anymore. They saw me as an asset. And soon they would try to claim me. The storm broke on a Saturday evening. Magnolia's Bistro, with its polished wood and the faint smell of garlic bread, was buzzing with clinking glasses and chatter. But at our table, the air was thick, brittle, ready to snap. I had chosen the place, thinking neutral ground might temper the blow. Instead, it became a stage for war. My parents sat across from me, smug and certain, their faces rehearsed into masks of authority. My sister lounged beside her boyfriend Brian, scrolling her phone with the bored air of someone waiting for the show to start. Daniel sat beside me, his steady presence like a wall of calm, while Aunt Carol, quiet as always, watched from the far end of the table. My father leaned in first, his voice deliberate, dripping with finality. "Celeste, we've decided. Tomorrow we're moving into your apartment. It's got more than enough room, and it's time you helped us out." My mother added with a curl of her lips, "It's what families do." They thought it was settled. They thought my silence would fold into compliance as it always had. I set my fork down carefully, the scrape of metal against china punctuating the moment. Then I smiled. Calm, unhurried. "That's interesting," I said evenly, "because I've already sold that apartment for $860,000. If you want to move in, bring that amount to the table." The silence that followed was electric. My father's jaw locked. My mother blinked, her smile collapsing into something raw. My sister dropped her phone, and even Brian, usually smug, froze with his fork halfway to his mouth. It was the soundless moment before a storm. Then the thunder came. "You're so selfish," my sister spat, her voice sharp enough to draw eyes from nearby tables. "Always hoarding everything for yourself. You've always been jealous of me." Brian leaned forward, his tone mocking. "Yeah, what's this act? You think you're better than everyone because you've got some money? You've always wanted to tear her down." Their words stung, but they were nothing new. Echoes of the past, dressed in fresh venom. My father leaned forward, his voice low and cutting. "You're turning your back on family. I'll make sure everyone in Greenville knows what kind of daughter you really are." My mother, ever the performer, let tears pool in her eyes. "After everything we sacrificed for you," she whispered, "this is how you repay us?" A bitter laugh caught in my throat. "You mean the sacrifices I made? Like giving up London so Dad's hospital bills could be paid? Like working double shifts while you paid for her Paris trip?" I locked eyes with them, my voice steady. "I'm done being your safety net." Daniel's hand found mine under the table, his grip warm, anchoring me as the storm raged. Across the table, Aunt Carol gave a subtle nod, her eyes sharp with approval. The battle lines were drawn. My sister scoffed and muttered, "Ungrateful." My mother dabbed theatrically at her eyes. My father's glare promised a reckoning. But I didn't flinch, not this time. That dinner was only the beginning. A week later, they escalated. I was in the middle of presenting a new app feature to my boss, Rebecca, when voices cut through the open plan office like a siren. "Where's Celeste?" my father barked, red-faced, his voice carrying across the rows of desks. "We deserve our share," my mother shouted, storming past stunned coworkers. "She's stealing our chance at a better life." Every keystroke in the room froze. Heads lifted, eyes wide. My stomach dropped, but I forced myself forward, meeting them in the center of the office. "This isn't the place," I said firmly, keeping my voice low. "We'll talk outside." But they weren't here to talk. They were here to humiliate. We raised you, my mother cried, her arms waving, her voice cracking with feigned desperation. You owe us everything. My father's face twisted with fury. You think you can cut us out? We'll see about that. Rebecca's eyes flickered from me to them, disbelief written on her face. Colleagues whispered. The startup I had built my name on was becoming a stage for their spectacle. I had no choice. My voice was calm, but my chest burned. Security, I said. Two guards appeared within minutes, guiding my parents toward the door as my mother shrieked, You'll regret this, Celeste. You'll regret it. The echo of her words lingered long after the doors closed. I stood there, heart hammering, shame prickling my skin, not because of what they had said, but because they had made my private battle public. Later that night, in Patrick Sullivan's office, he flipped through the paperwork with practiced calm. They have no grounds. The deal is airtight, he confirmed. I exhaled, part relief, part exhaustion. The armor I had built was holding, for now. But my sister wasn't done. Within days, she took to social media. A carefully staged photo of her, eyes red, face drawn, captioned, My sister's too greedy to help her own family. The comments came fast and cruel. How could she abandon you? Family comes first. Old friends unfriended me. Childhood neighbors sided with her version. Each notification was a jab. Each silence from those I thought would defend me was a wound. I wanted to fight back, to tell the world about the years I had carried them while they drained me dry. But I held back. Engaging would only fuel her fire. They weren't just trying to move into my home. They were trying to move into my life, my reputation, my work, my peace. And for the first time, I realized they would burn everything I'd built if it meant controlling me again. Cutting the rope didn't happen with one clean slice. It frayed, it snapped, and then it was gone. After that scene in my office, I blocked my parents' numbers. My sister's too. No more late-night calls. No more guilt-ridden voicemails. No more texts dripping with demands disguised as family duty. It felt brutal, but the silence that followed was like finally exhaling after years of drowning. Sharon Ellis, sharp, pragmatic, and one of the few people I trusted, looked me in the eye one night over coffee. You're free now, Celeste, she said, her voice firm but kind. Don't let them drag you back. So I threw myself into what mattered. Sharon and I launched our next project, an advanced health app focused on mental wellness. Her strategy and my coding meshed like clockwork, and within months we gained traction with local clinics. The app turned profitable faster than either of us expected. For the first time, every late night, every scar, felt like proof that my choice, protecting myself over saving them, had been right. And then there was Daniel. He and I built something quiet but strong, away from the noise of manipulation. 6 months later, in a small park ceremony under the branches of an old oak tree, we said our vows. Just us, a few close friends, and Aunt Carol smiling proudly in the front row. No lavish reception, no staged perfection, just a promise to build a life on our own terms. We moved into a cozy 2-bedroom on the edge of Greenville. It wasn't large, but it had a small yard where we dreamed of planting a garden, and a spare room that might one day hold a crib or a desk, depending on the path we chose. At night, unpacking boxes side by side, laughing over takeout, I felt lighter than I ever had before. My family, meanwhile, spiraled. Aunt Carol called occasionally, her voice laced with the heaviness of someone caught between love and disappointment. She told me my parents had taken out a second mortgage to cover more of my sister's expenses. New furniture, another trip. When the debt crushed them, they sold the family home, the brick house where I had spent years fixing sinks and hiding savings under loose floorboards. The place I once thought I'd always longed to return to was gone, sold off like a piece of furniture they'd grown tired of. They moved into a small retirement apartment, cutting back on dining out, vacations, and all the little luxuries they once bragged about. Carol said they still muttered my name bitterly, blaming me for their downfall, but I felt no guilt. They weren't living with the consequences of my choices. They were finally living with theirs. As for my sister, her downfall came with less spectacle but more bite. Brian, her boyfriend, broke up with her after years of draining him, too. One loud, ugly fight ended with him walking out, leaving her in tears. She moved into a cramped studio and took an admin job at a real estate office. Gone were the rooftop lofts and Paris trips. Her social media, once a parade of glitz, turned into snapshots of quiet meals and tired smiles. For the first time, she had to survive without being carried. I'd like to say I felt triumphant, but the truth was more complicated. There was no satisfaction in watching people unravel, even if they had once unraveled me. There was only a quiet, steady peace that I had finally chosen myself. One evening, as Daniel hung a photo from our wedding on the living room wall, I stood back and let the moment sink in. His hands were steady, his smile unguarded, and the light from the lamp caught the edges of the frame. For so long, I'd believed freedom meant running, scraping, fighting. But in that moment, I realized freedom could also mean standing still, in a space that was mine, with people who valued me for who I was, not for what I could give them. The scars from my family's betrayal will never fully fade, but scars aren't just reminders of pain, they're proof of survival. And for the first time, I wasn't invisible. I was free.